Welcome to The Big Picture, a show that takes a deep dive into the political landscape of not only America, but right here in our own backyard of Illinois.
It's showtime, folks.
The Big Picture is on WCPT 820. And now, here's your host, Edwin Eisendrath.
Hello, everybody. Today is Donald Trump's 79th birthday, and I wish him well. I really do. There is no irony in this. I wish it with my full heart. But what does it mean to wish someone well? Does it mean to wish they get everything they want? Of course not. Sometimes people want things that aren't good for them. When I wish someone well, I am intending that they learn and grow and come to know enough to want what is good. You know the phrase, friends don't let friends drive drunk? Well, in that light, I'm a better friend to our president than Republican members of Congress. I'm a truer friend than any foreign courtier who buys into a crooked crypto scheme or any corporate tycoon that pays out a phony legal settlement to further enrich the Trump family. They don't care about the man. They don't wish him well, no matter how much he thinks so. Wishing Donald Trump well means keeping him from doing further damage to his own soul and to our nation. I think it means giving him the wisdom and the opportunity to repent and atone and change his ways. That's my birthday wish for this man. But life is about more than wishes, and I don't expect any wish of mine to have its intended effect on him. I mean, after all, Donald Trump is a corrupt and dangerous man who shows no sign, zero, no interest, no desire to change his ways. Let's just, this week, Israel defied Donald Trump and attacked Iran. Trump forgot that he had urged Israel not to attack and posted a note to Iran. The note said, here it is, there has already been great death and destruction, but there is still time to make this slaughter come to an end. Make a deal before there's nothing left. Just do it before it's too late. God bless you all. It's as if Donald Trump is voicing America's own birthday wish to himself. Just stop now before it's too late, before there's nothing left. But, this was the man who promised peace on day one. But instead, he's provided cover for an expanded war. His post is pathetic and weak, and his leadership has put us all in danger. This expansion into Iran, of course, raises the threat of terrorist attacks against Americans anywhere in the world. And where's the U.S. to protect us from those terrorist attacks? I don't know. They're in El Paso and Los Angeles. Seriously? Yes, on his birthday, I wish he wasn't so pathetic. I wish for him the strength of character to meet our challenges, but I'm certainly not relying on my good wishes to save the country in this moment of peril. I'm fighting. I'm recording a bunch of this show today. I'll be here towards the end, but I'm recording the first part of it so I can be out in the No Kings rallies. We all have to do what we can. A few weeks ago, Representative Sean Casten said on this show that we're in a race. Either democracy will kill the Republican Party or the Republican Party will kill our democracy. Well, since then, we got plenty of evidence he's right. I mean, what they're doing is enormously unpopular, and if we could, we'd vote him out. But we don't have an election right now. But what are they doing? Well, Donald Trump has moved to further complete his corruption of our armed forces. I mean, since the time of George Washington, our military has vowed to be the servant of our democracy and to remain entirely independent of our partisan politics. But Donald Trump has worked hard to replace independent generals and other military leadership. He's put his stooge, Pete Hegseth, in charge of its civilian leadership. He's stripped away the JAG Corps that provided its legal leadership. And that corruption of our armed forces has real consequences, real dangerous consequences that are on display. This week, those partisans in charge allowed our armed services to wear MAGA gear while in uniform, to cheer at a MAGA political rally on an American military base. They allowed vendors to come onto that base and sell something called a white privilege card. That's a fake credit card that says white privilege trumps everything. It's sickening. This week, those partisans spent $45 million for a parade that's taking place today down the streets of Washington. It's a show of armed partisan allegiance, not to our nation, but to one man. Disgusting. And they, of course, sent our Marines to patrol the streets of our second largest city in support of an effort that the Homeland Security Secretary dared say was a fight to liberate California and Los Angeles from its elected governor and its elected mayor. That is a call for rebellion. That is a coup. Recall that Mr. Hegseth said at his confirmation that he was, here's a quote, laser focused on warfighting, lethality, meritocracy, standards, and readiness. Then think about what it means to send troops carrying white privilege cards into the streets of American cities. These aren't peacemakers. These aren't people keeping us safe. This corruption of our armed services, it follows the destruction of our justice system. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of the United States, has turned the Justice Department into a personal litigation service for Mr. Trump. She's used her thugs to arrest a mayor. They've indicted, she has a member of Congress and a judge for disagreeing with the administration. This week, her thugs threw to the ground and handcuffed a United States senator for asking a question during a press event in Los Angeles. Are you kidding? It's the corruption of both our military and our justice system that allows Mr. Hegseth to boast in a congressional hearing that he would not follow court orders. When asked specifically about the troop deployments in Los Angeles, here's what he said. This is a quote. We should not have local judges determining foreign policy or national security policy for the country. I'm sorry, Pete. Los Angeles is not a foreign country, and policing is not national security, except in a dictatorship. You know what? This week, we also learned that the administration is testifying in court cases that they are attempting to obey court orders while they are simultaneously telling each other how they are ignoring them. One of Pam Bondi's lieutenants, DHS attorney Joseph Mazzara, he was telling his colleagues, we have it, it's reported in the New York Times, here's a quote, we are trying to keep Abrego Garcia where he is, while testifying in court that the administration was complying with the order to bring him home. So much for the rule of law. And this week, the American Bar Association sent a letter to Pam Bondi. The ABA, they said, is both surprised and disappointed that the Justice Department has decided for the first time in 72 years to A, block access by the Standing Committee to judicial nominees, and B, to restrict access of the Standing Committee to information that is relevant in evaluating judicial nominees. Okay, what does that mean? Here's what it means. The nation's largest attorney organization no longer vets judicial appointments because legal qualifications take a backseat to partisan ones. Mr. Trump has corrupted our armed forces and our justice system. And I've talked elsewhere about he has undermined our electoral system and turned our trade policy into a personal enrichment scheme. He's also attacked the very idea that all are created equal. On his birthday, I wish for all the world that he were a better man. He's not. We have to fight. I have a great show lined up for you today. First couple interviews are taped. I'll be back for the last one and your calls at the end, but you're going to like this. Stay tuned.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
It's important, everybody, in this crazy time to find people who are thoughtful, who bring, historically and globally informed perspectives to our present conversations. And staff writer at The Atlantic, Tom Nichols, is just one of those rare people. I'm delighted to have him back. Tom, thanks for joining me today.
Glad to be with you.
Can we start with this week's Israeli attack on Iran, on what I think is an attack on their nuclear program and on their military leadership, although it's too early really to know what it is. I mean, whatever you think of Iran and its threat to gain nuclear capabilities, the attack raises some very difficult questions.
Yeah, it's the Israelis are claiming it's a preemptive attack, which I don't really think is going to fly. I mean, this is a pretty broad, anti-regime attack. The current reporting, and remember in the first day, all the reports are always going to be a little shaky. But current reporting is that they've wiped out most of the Iranian general staff. So this is a pretty broad-based attack. And as I wrote last night in the Atlantic, this is kind of the Michael Corleone attack, where Netanyahu's decided he's going to settle all family business and kind of take out everybody. So it's we're only at the beginning of the beginning now.
Well, right. I mean, I think that's a fair view that this is not a one strike and done attack, that this is an opening of another front in what's already been a very long and very painful and very tragic war.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a kind of slow motion exchange of violence over the years, and the Iranians, you can't blame the Israelis for finally taking the Iranians seriously after years of saying that they want to wipe Israel off the map. But there's a lot of risk involved in a preventive war, which is what this is. The Israelis are going to war on their schedule, when it's advantageous to them. And that's rolling some pretty big dice. On the other hand, they seem to be pulling it off pretty effectively right now. It's
certainly off to a strong start. Yeah.
Pardon me?
Yeah. They're off to a strong start in this phase with attacking Iran, but they have not shown us, Tom, that they have an exit strategy in Gaza, let alone in Iran.
Right. And, if you're going to go in with the hopes of, stimulating or sparking regime change, that's a pretty big gamble. And I think people should understand, even where the nuclear program is concerned, the Iranians have been pretty diligent about burying all that stuff and making it a lot harder to hit. So even the Israelis themselves are now admitting this could take weeks.
Yeah, I don't think they've said they would put ground troops in Iran.
No.
But I don't know how you know for sure you've taken out their nuclear capabilities without people on the ground. Now, they certainly do have assets on the ground, covert assets, but this is a very, very high-risk strategy.
Yeah, and the fact that there were covert operations, at least the Israelis are saying there were covert operations. I mean, it really tells you that the Iranians are in bad shape here, that the Israelis were able to penetrate Iran, that they were able to get this many people on the general staff, which, as one of my friends said, means either the Israelis are very good or the general staff is very bad.
Or both.
Or both, yeah. This tells you that the Iranians were already, having some serious problems here.
Yeah, the last 600 days have eroded Iran's capacity a lot. They've lost their proxies. Most of them are deeply weakened in the region. They've been hit now by air by Israel already before. So they're definitely weakened, which leads me to think they cannot fight this conventionally. So everything about their past behavior leads me to think that we will see an increase in terrorist attacks against Israelis, against Americans, and against Jewish people wherever they think they can pull those attacks off.
That I just don't know, Ed. I mean, they can do other things. They're not powerless. They can launch a lot of missiles at Israel. Iran is a big place with a lot of weapons. This isn't some fourth-rank power that's going to have to resort to, car bombs. But, as you say, they've lost a lot of their proxies, and they've been a state sponsor of terror. So, they're going They have to strike back. They're gonna.
They have no choice.
They can't appear weak here. They have no choice now, right?
They have no choice. Yeah. All right. Well, let's put that on our list of things to pay very close attention to. And I know it's a vain hope, but to hope that this comes to an end more quickly than more slowly, and the slaughter in that part of the world eases.
And without some kind of accident or escalation that, turns it into a bigger conflagration. Because again, especially when you're talking about and Americans should know, right? I mean, we've engaged in our own preventive war in 2002, and that had a lot of unforeseen consequences in the Middle East. We're still paying, we're still paying the piper there. And I say that as somebody who
decades.
And I say that as somebody who supported taking out Saddam Hussein back then.
Oops.
So, well, it's,
happens. Oops.
But again, with a war of choice like that, what I didn't count on, and I've written about this, was that, I had no doubt that we could topple the regime militarily. What I didn't count on is that we would then just sort of throw up our hands and say, and screw up the peace and, do stupid things like disband the Iraqi army and things like that. So
I'm not sure
that's one of those, had I known that we were going to be that incompetent, I would never have supported that kind of action.
Right. Or had you known they were lying about the intelligence, but all of that came later. Yeah. Tom, I got to throw one flag out. I think that there were people, and I worked in the government 10 years before that, but I think there were people genuinely believe that Saddam Hussein was hiding something because Saddam Hussein was acting like he was hiding something. But I think I agree. I actually want to link this to the Israeli thing, which is that there were 900 good reasons to go to war against Iraq, just as there are many good reasons to go to war for the Israelis to go to war against Iran. But I'm worried that in each case, the governments involved picked one of the weakest rationales, which is that, we have to preempt this kind of immediate nuclear threat instead of simply, making the people around Bush later admitted, they said, look, we thought we had a dozen good reasons. And as it turns out, we relied on the thing that was the weakest one because we thought, even though we thought it was true, we thought it was weak and it was the easiest one to sell. And I think that's always a mistake. I think it's better to just level with your people and say, we're doing this because this government is simply too dangerous, or that, we have other evidence that we're trying to deal with. But I'm a little worried that when the Israelis said we are, preempting a nuclear program, I thought, oh boy, I've heard that one before. But I think in this case, it's probably true. I mean, Joe Biden went there after October 7th and said, I stand with the Israeli people against this horrible attack, but let me warn you about our mistakes. And they were delighted, Bibi was, to accept us standing with them if that horrible attack, and they were equally eager to ignore the advice, as we are seeing. Yeah. Wow. All right, let's talk about us, shall we? And I have thought, and it's a terrible thought, and I could be very wrong. So I'm hoping to explore it with you. The urgency of this moment, I think, is comparable only in our history to the moment when Robert E. Lee decided to take the Civil War north and was literally like a few feet from victory that would have secured secession, at Little Round Top in Gettysburg. I think this week feels to me like we're at the beginning of our version of Robert Lee has come north, and we might actually be starting the battle at Gettysburg. And I want to explore that with you. There's a lot happened this week that leads me to believe that our democracy really is in peril.
Well, our democracy is really in peril, but I think it's too much to say that we're at Gettysburg. One of the reasons that Trump is doing the things he's doing, in my opinion, is not because he feels strong, but because he's losing. He's trying to spark a confrontation in Los Angeles because he's been getting hammered in the courts.
Tom, I agree with you. But before you keep going, let me put this on the table. I think Robert E. Lee came north because they were losing the battle in the South, and they wanted to bring the fight to the North to get the North to say, yeah, we don't want that.
Yeah. But I think that was actually a clever strategy. But in Trump's case, I think this is born out of an attempt to win. I think there's two reasons and two things to really be worried about. One, as my colleague David Frum wrote, this is a dress rehearsal. This isn't really about Los Angeles. This is about Trump testing the tolerance of the American public for this very un-American thing of putting soldiers in the streets. Because if he can get away with it in Los Angeles, he'll start declaring any place that pisses him off to be, under invasion or in rebellion or insurrection. And if he does that during elections, then you can talk about we're at Gettysburg. I think the other reason he's doing it is that he, insofar as he actually still cares about the battle for public opinion, he's trying to get the people that matter to him to stay true to the narrative that the United States is under foreign invasion, that, state governors and mayors don't matter, that all power rests in the White House. And I think, he's been communicating that pretty effectively. Most people disapprove of his actions nationally, but national polls don't tell the whole story. I'm very worried that he's winning the war of images here. On the other hand, again, he's doing all this because he's weak. I think that this birthday parade he's throwing himself is, if it goes off, I guess there's some forecast of thunderstorms, but he's, I think it could blow up in his face, that it just looks silly. But of course, once again, in both Los Angeles and in Washington, he's hoping to draw the foul. He wants people to come out and protest. He wants to have video of people being arrested and throwing rocks at people in uniform. I mean, this is what he's counting on. And I always worry that there are people out there who are more than willing to give him exactly what he's trying to get them to do.
Yeah, no, there's no question that people are very angry and they will make mistakes, and that there are provocateurs in every crowd. No question. What do you make of I just think the U.S. military is being captured at Fort Bragg, where he handpicks these people to stand behind him and cheer at a political rally on a U.S. base. You've talked about this military parade. In Fort Bragg, they invited a vendor to sell MAGA merchandise on the base, and among that merchandise was something called the white privilege card. That said white privilege trumps everything, and they were selling that to soldiers on the base.
The Fort Bragg story.
Go ahead.
The Fort Bragg story is a lot more worrisome than what's going on in Los Angeles, in my opinion. In Los Angeles, yes, the brutish behavior of ICE and, the attempts to round up, illegal immigrants are horrible. I mean, most people believe that people who are here illegally shouldn't be allowed to stay here, but they also don't believe in, masked cops whisking people away into, unmarked cars. I mean, it's just wrong. But the long-term threat is what Trump did in Fort Bragg, which is basically a straight up, no bones about it, naked attempt to turn the U.S. military into his personal partisan muscle. He stood there and he ridiculed other elected officials of the United States, and those soldiers were encouraged to clap and jeer and be part of that. It's an incredible, obscene breach of American civil military traditions. That's personally, I wrote a piece. I said, where are the generals? Where are the people who should speak out? Whoever allowed that merchandise to be sold on government property, which is a complete violation of Army and DOD regulations, should be fired. And if Hegseth wants to put him back, then whoever fires the guy and gets overruled should resign and go public. But somebody needs to get fired for what happened at Fort Bragg. And until that happens, I think people should be very worried about, as you put it, Trump's attempt to capture the military. Because most people in the military are patriots. They know their duty to the Constitution. But, a lot of those people behind him, they're young. They take cues from their non-coms and their officers. And clearly, the message from their officers is this is okay.
Right. And you wrote that piece, and we have not heard from anyone in the Defense Department, not military or civilian, to say that this was bad.
Well, you won't hear it from the civilians because the civilians are all Trump appointees. But, where is the Army Chief of Staff? Where's the commander, the three-star who's in charge of the paratroopers at Bragg? Why does the colonel who runs Fort Bragg still have a job? What happened here?
I am terrified. I mean, I never thought that should we come to this horrible moment that's like Tiananmen Square in America, I was confident. I think I'm still confident, but I am no longer sure that American soldiers would not just fire on Americans sitting there protesting their government. But after Fort Bragg, I don't think we can be sure. And that is as terrifying and appalling and dangerous. And I'm going back to Gettysburg, because if we cross that threshold, then, Election Day is even further down the road. That's terrifying.
Again, before we get too close to Gettysburg, let's remember that, U.S. soldiers firing on American citizens has happened before. And the Army has been, most of the people killed in the Watts riots in Los Angeles in the 60s were actually shot by the military. Kent State happened, and our democracy endured and survived and endured. And so I'm as confident as you are, but I admit that I never, like the first fire break that's crossed, I never thought I would see a group of military people behind the commander-in-chief, jeering and imitating his funny little dances and laughing at his attacks on other politicians. I mean, it's just something I spent 25 years teaching military officers. I just never thought that I would ever see anything like that. So, yeah, I mean, and I think, one thing that's important to understand is that kind of behavior corrodes trust among many Americans in the military.
Me
the
included.
military enjoys a huge amount of trust in American society, and this really doesn't. But Trump doesn't care about that. Trump cares about what benefits Trump.
Yes, I know. Happy birthday, Donald. But this is not. It erodes my trust. It makes me very concerned, and the capture of the military, which he is really trying to do, and we do not see it defending itself as it should, follows his capture of the justice system, which I think we have seen. You're talking about the stuff that's frightening in Los Angeles.
Well,
one of those things
let's not go too far down the dark path, because there are still judges and lawyers.
I'm not talking about the judiciary,
and they're winning.
I'm not talking about the judiciary. I'm talking about the
Justice Department.
Yeah, and justice, the executive side of the justice system.
I suppose one thing that everybody should take a little bit of comfort from is that he has captured all of these cabinet departments, but he's also staffed them with really incompetent people, who can't seem to get out of each other's way. But that could change. And, you're right. It's deeply concerning. I said before he was elected, he only has to capture a few institutions: the military, the Justice Department, the FBI, and the intelligence community.
Okay, well, he's following your script. Yep. He's following your script.
Well, he's following the script of every authoritarian.
Yep.
Those are always the institutions they go after.
I mean, I'm again angry and outraged that he has arrested a mayor, indicted a member of Congress, indicted a judge, thrown to the ground and handcuffed a U.S. senator this week. The U.S. senator incident came while his Homeland Security cabinet secretary said, "Look, I'm here to liberate California from its elected governor and Los Angeles from its elected mayor." That sounds, there's no way to hear that.
Like, I'm here to overthrow the local authorities.
Yes, and I'm here with a U.S. with a nationalized National Guard and with the U.S. Marines to do it. And by the way, a United States Senator, if he dares to ask me a question, we're going to haul him off in handcuffs. That sends a chilling message.
The biggest story in the next few days that everybody ought to be paying attention to is that Trump has now been ordered to return control of the Guard back to Governor Newsom. And he has
the Ninth Circuit, I think, got in the way of that and said we're staying that until we have time to hear it.
Right.
So
I think the stay is until Monday, right?
Yeah, but I think they're going to probably try and hear it and make some statement about it before then. So,
yeah. If that must have just happened, so I must have missed that.
But he has to return the National Guard. I think they will find that. I mean, whether it's just a stay or a stay for them to find the time to say it, that's what they're going to say, and we'll see what happens. And so then it goes up to his friends in the Supreme Court.
Well, and then we really see, what we're made of.
Yeah.
As a country.
Yep. There are two things going on. One is what he's trying to do to undermine the democracy, to gain this untethered power. But the other is we begin to see what he would do with that untethered power. We see it in this one big bill that they're chalking up, which has provisions in it that further erode those courts that you said were holding. Oh, you can't hold us in contempt. Mm-hmm. And that turns every Trump executive order into the law of the land, effectively saying he is a dictator. I don't think the Senate will pass that, but the House is saying, "Oh, we didn't read it, but we passed it," and the Senate before has said, "Yeah, we object to things, but they end up passing them." I worry about that a lot. And the other things that he says he'll do, I mean, it's pretty scary.
And the shame here, he said all this stuff before he was elected. And it's somehow, I think there are millions of Americans who have just gotten used to treating Trump like an amusing, bratty child. And they say, "Oh, he says a lot of." I've had this argument with Trump voters. They say, "Oh, he says a lot of things, but he's going to bring down the price of gas."
Well, now he's doing those things and not bringing down the price of anything.
Well, right, and they're like, well, I mean, look, the defense mechanisms of people, who strongly support Donald Trump are really impressive. It's, other people are stopping him. It's the deep state. It's the Democrats. It's, you name it. They find a way to rationalize it because in the end, I think one of the things we're learning here, because you talked about what Trump really wants to do. This election was about people just wanting to stick it to other people that they didn't happen to like politically. And what Trump really is going to do, there isn't much. I mean, people like Stephen Miller and Russ Vought they're ideologues. They believe in stuff. But most of the people, including Trump and most of the people around him, I think the goal is stay in power, stay out of jail, loot the Treasury, oppress people that you don't like. And there's not much of a project beyond that. Just keep, I'm sure at this point that Trump's trying to figure out how to create this as a dynastic, sort of regime. But that's really what it comes down to. I mean, look, I'm getting these people that are yelling at me about, you Trump opponents, the bill, trying to save America. And I keep pointing out, look, he's going to take money from you and give it to me. Like 80% of the people in this country are going to lose money. 20% of the people are going to get money. And
it's not the 20% who need it most.
I sort of don't know how to reason with people anymore. Want to say, look, if you insist that that I must take money that you are going to give me, I guess I don't really understand your politics.
Yeah, well, I mean, Tom, you said that his supporters say Trump, they discount what he says. Yeah, he's a bluster. He doesn't really mean it. He's really on my side and he just says that to get under your skin. But the other part, the thing you didn't say is that years and years and years of a certain kind of journalism in America, and here I'm not just talking about Fox. I think I'm talking about most serious journalism since Watergate, has helped Americans think everyone in politics is a crook. Everyone doesn't mean it. Everyone's guilty. And I know that not to be true. And yet that cynicism has given license to the worst behavior we've ever seen.
Right, and it definitely is one of the defense mechanisms. The "what about" answer. They say, this is the president's selling the Oval Office. He's selling pardons. He's literally selling access. And they say, but what about Hunter Biden? Because they've been fed this steady diet of craziness, and then you say, well, Hunter Biden. This isn't even comparable. Trump's the president. And they said, but what about Obama? What about Clinton? What about this? And it's a lazy way to argue, but it also shows you that deep down somewhere they know that there is not that what they really mean is I know it's true, but I don't care.
Well, right.
And I don't know how you sustain a democracy on that.
Right. You have to say to them, let's not talk about Hunter Biden. Let's talk about what you do care about. Let's talk about the kind of country you want to have. What do you expect from our leaders? When do you want to start getting there? If not now, when?
Negative. Well, what you get are negative answers. You say, well, what I want is to stop socialism and to end DEI and to, screw over Harvard. And, again, it really is difficult to kind of sit with a person like that and say, yes, but what is it? What does America look like? What would make you happy? And I can remember going through this exercise with a few people who are close to me. And, in the end, the answer was nothing. Nothing's going to make them happy. But what they hope for is that everybody else is made equally unhappy as they are. I just want you to. I know. Like one friend of mine is like, I know I can't fix all this stuff and it's going to be bad, but everybody should suffer too. There's that famous line from a Trump supporter. Well, the Trump supporter some years ago who lost her job during one of Trump's government shutdowns. And she said, I don't understand this. He's not hurting the people he's supposed to hurt. And if you're going to the voting booth and you're casting a ballot based on I'm voting for this person to hurt other citizens, then you've really lost the plot as an American citizen.
Yeah, you have. I hope that is nowhere near a majority. I hope that is, hovering at some 30%. And we can cobble together a real majority.
I don't think it's remotely a majority, but part of the problem is that you have millions of people. I mean, in 2024, voter turnout dropped. Now, think about that. Donald Trump is out there on the campaign trail basically saying, I'm going to rule like a dictator. I'm going to, round people up. I'm going to, do all this. I'm going to do tariffs. I had a discussion with a Trump supporter in Pennsylvania, and she said, he's going to do all the things I want. And I said, you're a small business owner. You're in favor of tariffs? She's always not going to do that. I mean, there is a kind of a bubble around folks that you just can't get through about this. And I don't think they're a majority. I think the problem is that there are millions of people who go, when you talk about tariffs, they say, I don't know what a tariff is and I don't care. And you don't know how to tell it. Well, when you get to Walmart and that coffee maker costs an extra $20, you're going to care. You're going to notice it.
I hope Democrats are tougher.
You're going to blame.
I hope they say Trumpflation. I hope they, give no quarter here and stop trying to split hairs and be scholarly about this, because this is not where we are at this moment.
Well, unfortunately, Trump plays the blame game better than the Democrats do. The Democrats still, have this. At least a lot of the institutional Democrats have an approach to this that basically is like, we're going to issue a very important think tank white paper on this. When that doesn't really, get you anywhere.
Speechless, right? Speechless. And as my brilliant wife says, the Democrats should be standing outside grocery stores and talking to people when they come out and saying, did you know they don't inspect that milk anymore? Did you know that they won't tell you if your lettuce has E. coli in it anymore? How do you feel about that bag of groceries?
Yeah, I have to admit, I probably wouldn't be standing outside a grocery store, because I think, again, that there are a lot of Trump supporters who are looking for just shouty, empty confrontations. But, yeah, your local member of Congress, traveling the district and saying, here, I just went to, Mike's grocery store. We all go there. We all know it. Here's why this thing you just bought is more expensive.
Right? It's not hard. We just got to start doing it. Let me ask you about some sort of the world stage. We were, of course, promised by this genius 90 trade deals in 90 days. We were promised he would end the Middle East war on day one, and he would end the Ukraine war on day one. And none of these things has happened. Like, what's happened in its stead? What's happened to America because of his leadership around Ukraine?
Well, let me just, before we talk about the actual impact, let me just again remind you that when you remind his supporters about this, basically they say, I don't care. That was just campaign stuff. I just wanted him in office. And he's never held responsible for lying to his own people. He treats his own voters with such contempt that it's really remarkable, especially among voters who feel like politicians look down on them. Nobody looks down on the average voter more than Donald Trump.
Or
what happened to us overseas?
Donald Trump. Yeah.
But what's happened to us overseas is that the world is now moving on and acting as if the United States doesn't exist. The Israelis are going to do what they do in Iran. We talked about this a moment ago. Maybe it's the right thing, maybe it's the wrong thing, but they don't really worry about America and what we're going to think about it. This reminds me of something I read years ago when America, you and I are old enough to remember America hitting the skids in the mid-'70s when we just lost in Vietnam and our economy was a shambles and we had an unelected president and vice president and, it was just a mess. And a Soviet diplomat in his memoir said, we did our foreign planning in Moscow as if the Americans just weren't even a factor. We didn't take Washington into account for anything. And that's what's happening now. And even among our allies. I mean, the Ukrainian Operation Spiderweb, the Ukrainian assault on those Russian air bases, is going to go down in the history books. I mean, it's amazing.
Amazing.
And, it's just incredible. And especially, I think, so that your listeners understand, a lot of the planes, a lot of the bombers that those guys destroyed, the Russians can't replace them. They don't make those anymore. And so this was really this was a seriously, stick it in and break it off kind of moment, kind of attack. And the Ukrainians, our friends, our allies, people we should be supporting, they didn't really ask us about it. And, they struck deep inside Russia and just said, look, I'm sorry, you guys are all mired in your own problems and you're arguing about, whether or not Toni Morrison should be taken off the shelf at the Naval Academy. We're fighting for our lives over here. We just can't be involved in, your inane, crack pottery back home. And that really worries me. And NATO, I mean, who's the new leader of the free world? Friedrich Merz? Keir Starmer? Emmanuel Macron? Who knows? But it's not us.
I know who it isn't. It isn't Donald Trump, and it isn't the United States.
Right. And that's really – but when I used to teach political science, we would talk about definitions of power. And, one of the simplest definitions of power is that other people have to take you into account in their calculations. You have power if someone says, I want to do X, Y, or Z, but I need to know what this guy is going to do because that matters. when other people start leaving you out of their calculations, you've lost a lot of power. You've lost a lot of influence. You've lost the ability to shape events. And unfortunately, what Trump and Trumpism is all about is just looking inward and, settling these little petty slap fights about, DEI and liberal professors and, all this other MAGA red meat while the world moves on without us in very dangerous directions. And I think the average American simply does not understand that a secure and prosperous world is part of what enables their standard of living at home. They don't make that connection. And by the time they get it, it could be too late.
Sure, I get that. And voters everywhere have their own lives to worry about, and they shouldn't have to do the kind of heavy lifting of scholarship or anything else that you've done. You went to Thucydides in your piece on Israel and Iran, and that's a separate conversation you and I can have. But it is up to the people who are in charge. There are people in the United States Senate who know this. There are people in the House who know this. There are people in the executive branch who know this, and it is their duty as leaders to act on that knowledge, not to pretend it doesn't exist so they can argue about Toni Morrison.
Yeah, the Senate, the behavior of the Republican Senate, every now and then I have to sit back, I'm reading the news, and I think Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was actually voted and confirmed by the Senate of the United States.
Right, to a position of health
actually confirmed
instead of a position of death, and he's going to kill us. It's just mind-boggling.
It's going to get a lot of people hurt for sure.
Yeah.
Tulsi Gabbard was confirmed by the U.S. Senate. That is just a dereliction of duty by those senators. They knew better.
It is.
And they are so craven and so careerist. And
how about not speaking up for a senator in handcuffs? How about that the best they can say, Senator Thune, is I think I'll look into that.
Well, it's the Susan Collins approach. Very concerned.
Very concerned. Yes, sure. That and a dime.
And I think part of what you're seeing is a dysfunction of our electoral system, where a tiny number of people of the most extreme type control primaries. And these senators know, look, that their way, they don't have to win statewide election. They just have to survive their primary. This is true among Democrats as well. If you're a Democrat in New York, people keep, back when AOC, when Cortez won, there were people saying she beat this veteran congressman. Well, she beat him in a 12% turnout race in a primary.
Yep.
And what a lot of politicians are learning is squeak by that small number of people, and you can stay in Washington. And this is, I hate to say this, Ed, but I think it's true that a lot of these people in the House, a lot of the Republicans in the House and Senate simply don't want to lose and have to go home and live among the people that elected them. They don't like their own constituents. They fear them. George Will had a great line years ago. He said, the Republican Party is the first party in American history to actively fear and hate its own constituents.
Related to that, Congressman Sean Casten.
And that leads to a lot of very careerist behavior.
Yeah. Sean Casten said to me, we're in a race because all these things Republicans want to do are so terribly unpopular. We're racing whether the Republican Party will be destroyed by our democracy, because they really don't like what they're doing, or whether the Republican Party will destroy our democracy. And that's the race we're in right now. And because there is no right of center party anymore in America. It doesn't exist. You have MAGA and you have whatever the Democrats are.
Yeah, and you have, among the Democrats, there's a fight going on there because, the center is now occupied primarily by moderately liberal Democrats. I think without Trump and without this kind of MAGA primary chokehold, you'd find that there are some centrist Republicans left in the Senate. But, there's Kurt Vonnegut had a beautiful line in his book, Mother Night. We are what we pretend to be, and so we have to be careful what we pretend to be.
Yeah.
And I think some of these Republicans have now pantomimed this behavior so much that it's just become part of them now. That
they are who they are. I agree with you.
I don't think John Thune does not strike me as a particularly extreme politician, for example. But how many years of playing along with MAGA before, the act and the reality become the same?
Right. His private motives don't matter.
Don't know
to
the
me.
answer to that.
It's what he's doing in public that matters in that job. That's Machiavellian. I'm down with that. All right, let me go back
How ironic that the guy who has reestablished his cred as a centrist is Mitch McConnell.
Really? Isn't it amazing?
It's like, hey, I'm retiring. I'm 85 years old. I don't care. I'm voting against Pete Hegseth.
But everybody knew he had guts. Even the people who disagreed with him every time knew he had guts. He wasn't a coward.
Yeah, but
right?
there was always, when he was majority leader, he had the opportunity to bring the Senate together, convict Trump, force him out of our public life forever. And he didn't do it because he punted that off to people and saying, well, the American people, they've learned their lesson. They're not going to put this guy back.
Yeah, I think he'll go to his grave.
He didn't want to do it. Nobody wanted to be the guy that had to be the one to pull the lever, on the ejection seat to get Trump out of the Republican car. And so on that, let's not feel too
he
warm
owns
and
that.
fuzzy.
You're right.
McConnell.
He owns that shame. Absolutely right. All right, I'm going to end by going back to your piece on Israel and Iran because you pulled the Thucydides card. And, their war, back then, there was a Greek culture that was fascinating and interesting and strong and creative and left us some legacies that matter all these thousands of years later. But that culture came to a complete crash and ended because two big powers got in a dispute over some 4 ships in Corcyra that nobody ever heard of, way off in a corner, and it set in motion, these little allies got their big guys involved and set off this terrible tragedy for them. Are you worried that Israel and Iran is going to do the same thing to us?
No, but it could happen. It's possible that the thing I always worry about is, as you know, I used to teach at a war college. I was the chairman of the strategy department. We used to teach about Clausewitz, fog and friction, and the unforeseeable, the black swan events.
Yes.
That nobody could imagine, that an errant missile or, the wrong person is in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
You brought up the Peloponnesian War, so I have to wax professorial for a moment and tell people that what really starts the Peloponnesian War is that the Spartans decide that they have to take out the Athenians while they still can.
Yes.
Which is a classic preventive war, which is what we did in Iraq. It's what we said we got to take this guy out before he has nuclear weapons, and it's too difficult to take him out. The Israelis are saying the same thing about Iranians. We have to preempt their nuclear program. We have to destroy their leadership. Preventive wars are a dangerous, risky thing. And even though Sparta, through a fluke, by the way, wins that war with Athens, it ends up destroying both Sparta and Athens.
Yep. Both
empires fall. And it's basically Sparta's victory ends the Greek world. And after that, you have, Alexander and the Romans and then the Ottomans and so, the Spartan victory came at the price of basically ending the Greek world as we knew it back then. So,
during the war,
unforeseen things that can happen.
Yes. And one thing that they learned was every kind of cultural norm, every restraint they thought they had when they went into that war disappeared during it.
Athens welcomed this war. Athens was a democracy. Sparta was a slave-holding oligarchy, a monarchy. And the Athenians began, saying we're a democracy, we're strong, we're the good guys. And by about 15, 16 years into that war, they were just taking over. They show up at an island called Milos, and they say, okay, guess what? You're on our side now. And the locals say, well, we don't really want to be on your side. And they say, okay, we'll just kill all the men, sell the women into slavery, and you're out of here.
You were done.
I mean, it changed Athens. It turned the Athenians into as brutal an empire as any other. And that's a real concern
we should worry
about being at war all the time.
All right, and that's going to be our last word because we're out of time. Separately, you and I are going to talk about the Melian dialogue sometime and the origins of that war. Very interesting stuff.
Anytime.
And for those of you who are listening, it's relevant. It may be a couple thousand years old, but Thucydides is always relevant.
General Marshall, Ed, I just will tell your viewers, your listeners, General Marshall, after World War II, said no one could understand the modern world during the beginning of the Cold War without reviewing the Peloponnesian War. That's how important a cultural touchstone it's been for people who care about international relations.
As always, Tom, fascinating, and thank you. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody. Congressman Greg Landsman is back with us. He serves folks in Ohio's first CD that's in the southwest of Ohio. I think, correct me if I'm wrong. He served, he was on the city council there. I got it right? Good. He was on the city council there before he actually flipped a seat, a couple years ago. And he's a get things done kind of what in normal times you would expect when you send someone to Congress or, to any level of government. Greg, thank you for joining us again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Look, I want to apologize before I even start because I know that real work goes on even in this terrible Congress, and that it's important to work on the things that your constituents need to try and pass bills, because sometimes it takes 2 or 3 Congresses to get those bills into law. And I know you're working on that stuff. So will you forgive me if today we talk about other things?
Yeah, no problem. I mean, it's completely understandable for you. There's obviously the day-to-day work that you got to, you have to dig in and lead on constituent work, legislative work, and get as many wins as humanly possible. But there are these big, I don't want to be over the top, but some of it is existential. I mean, in terms of our democracy and just the way we have been. For as long as I've been alive, that stuff is on the chopping block. So that's where the fight is.
Yeah, one of your colleagues, Sean Casten, said on this show, we're in a race because what the Republicans want to do is so unpopular that we're going to see whether democracy kills the Republican Party before the Republican Party kills democracy, which I thought was a pretty tough way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's Sean's a good friend and a great member of Congress. It is true that I think, Trump is in the middle of attempting to burn down the government as we know it, the federal government, and the investments it makes in our communities and children and families and veterans. And to build something that is, equivalent to an authoritarian regime where he has all of the power and he does with it what he wants. And so far, you've seen, in addition to the just pure mayhem in the immigration policies, just blatant corruption. I mean, he is using the office to enrich himself and his businesses and his partners and his billionaire friends. So it's not like he's building anything for anyone other than himself. And today's parade is an example of that. That parade is for him. And it is the exact opposite. So the question, I'd sort of extend Sean's question to, does the Republican Party, ultimately save itself from Trump, or does Trump just burn that party to the ground? Because I'm seeing him burn the party to the ground. I mean, at the end of this, it's going to be very difficult for people to say, oh, we trust you, And Democrats have issues, and we've got to work through those issues.
Totally right.
But the issues that Republicans will have in the aftermath of Trump will be potentially insurmountable.
I agree with you. I mean, America needs a right-of-center party. And by the way, Democrats need a right-of-center party, or we'll go astray. So that's the kind of dialogue that has to happen, right? So I hope that we get one. I agree with your concern that it's probably not today's Republican Party. I don't know that it can recover from this. Hey, you talked about corruption. And just for 1 second, I don't know if this was true when you were a city councilman. When I was a city councilman, my colleagues went to jail with some regularity here in Chicago for, petty corruption, like $2,000 to help a guy get a curb cut, which you needed an ordinance for, would send a guy to jail. And Chicagoans were happy to send him to jail. We had the Chicagoans don't like, even though we see it around us, we don't like corrupt politicians who line their own pockets. Never have. And I can imagine it's the same in Cincinnati. How is it that the country knows this man is a grifter and a thief? And it's like, meh.
Because the accountability structures have been set up to protect him for the moment. The Justice Department, which is supposed to be independent, is run by a Trump loyalist, Pam Bondi. And so they're not going to pursue anything. Yeah. And then the Republican-controlled Congress, which is set up in the Constitution to provide oversight and to hold, him accountable for the criminal activity, it is not willing to pursue a single minute of investigating any of this, even though there is the Trump coin, which is essentially a Swiss bank account or a Venmo, where people are just depositing money and in exchange for pardons and presumably other favors. That's what needs to be investigated. But some of it has already been reported on and is pretty blatant. You have the Qatari bribe claim and all of the money he was able to secure it on that trip, mostly for American businesses, but there are a ton of things that he's getting through the sons and their travels around the world. They are literally just going around the world using the office of the presidency to get as much money from people into Trump businesses as possible.
Right. And crypto. Yeah.
And then you just have the fact that he's got these billionaires running the country, and they're all getting richer, including himself, because of what they're doing with the stock market and his taco-based trade policy, where
manipulation. Yep.
The manipulation, and so I'm sure that's just the tip of the iceberg. But the reason it's not because it's popular, although I do think that the American people hate it less than the kind of big money politics corruption they see every day with both parties, where big money influence gets all of the things they want at the expense of the rest of us. That's why I don't take PAC money, corporate PAC money. I think it's terrible. They hate that stuff because that stuff affects their lives. They hate the run-of-the-mill corruption where people are lining their own pockets. But you don't have a Congress yet that's willing to hold this guy accountable.
That's amazing. Your Ohio colleague Jim Jordan used to think that, I don't know, any whiff of wrongdoing in the executive branch was worth a subcommittee and a set of hearings and table pounding. And he made a career of that. He certainly didn't make a career passing legislation. He made a career of that. The hypocrisy of these guys is mountainous.
Yeah, I think we get into, and we have to, all of us have to be very careful, those of us who are sort of in this world, not to get too far entrenched in our sides, right? Because you start to see, some of the things that you need to see if you were, a team member, but not one that ignores the stuff on your own side. And I think, I think there is a period where maybe they're not seeing it, or they think, hey, this is different, and they sort of justify it however they do. I've seen Democrats do similar things, and so you do have to, be the kind of people that when they see it, even if it's not even if you don't know, you still say, hey, that's a problem. Someone needs to look into it. And if everything's fine, everything's fine. Yeah.
You and I agree on that. I mean, I ran against Democratic governor in my own party in a primary because he was a crook, Blagojevich. I get it. I mean, right? We have to put our people first.
That's 100%. I mean, I remember talking to my dad, and I've said this publicly, but I sort of my dad is a guy that is a good barometer for me. And I said about the Hunter Biden stuff, I said, Dad, if I come to you and I'm trying to do business, but he said, I never would have let you do that. I never would have allowed you to, go do business abroad. I mean, even if everything was above board and Joe Biden did, it's just the appearance of it. My dad's line is, you know where the line is and you don't go anywhere near it. And it was true. I don't think that there was this Biden crime family, but it was an issue that his son was over there, or wherever he was, making deals on and trying to get his dad on the phone. I mean, it's using the office in a way that's not appropriate.
Yeah. Yep. But the comparison to the level of grift today is. Oh no!
I'm just
instructive. Let's say it's instructive. The difference.
It's instructive in that if we're willing to say, hey, there were issues there, and we should have been louder. The Republicans should absolutely look at this. And they have to know. I mean, the Trump coin itself is so. It's just the paying for pardons.
Yeah,
it's absolutely disgusting.
Disgusting. Yeah. I mean, disgusting. Let's talk about another aspect. This the militarization of America. And the politicization of the military. What happened at Fort Bragg this week is one of the most disturbing things for me that I've seen that I can remember. I mean, what's your take on, selling partisan merchandise on a military base, using our soldiers for a political rally, encouraging them to be partisan? That's frightening stuff.
Yeah. I have so much reverence for those who serve, as I know you do, and and part of why there's such a visceral reaction to this is because of the way in which, we admire these service members who commit their lives, not just to public service, but the kind of public service that could get them killed. And they do it on behalf of all of us. And it's why we are one of the safer countries, probably the safest countries in the world in terms of a foreign adversary attacking us. And they should be revered and lifted up, and everything should be about them. And to pull them into your stuff is so disrespectful. Trump, using them for his birthday parade, saying, hey, I've got this, chaotic immigration approach, and it's, I'd like to pull you into that. And pull you away from the work that you're doing, your assignments, the assignments that you were given by your higher ups that matter to national security. We're going to pull you away from all of that stuff so that you can be part of my theatrical nonsense in LA as I try to get attention and pull attention towards me and away from this terrible bill that I'm trying to get through the Senate that will strip health care away from millions of Americans. You now have to go to LA. And if there are people who are and you have no real assignment there, but just go. So disrespectful. And then to say, on a day where they should have the day off. I mean, on a Saturday, I have a lot of folks, a lot of members of Congress who serves. their day off is this is the last thing they want to be doing is walking in a 90-degree heat parade in service to a single person. That's not how the military works. It just isn't, and it is so disrespectful, and it's costly. It's going to cost taxpayers $45 million. It's going to cost DC tens of millions of dollars to repair the roads and water line. But the cost of veterans in the military, it's so infuriating. And yes, he's going to put them in these terrible positions if there are people who are protesting him because he made it about him, not them. He's going to say, "Go get him." And that's not their assignment. That's not what they trained for. That's not what they want to do. They literally signed up to protect Americans, not go after them.
It's awful. And this administration, I'm Pete Hegseth, parenthetically, moron, has, said the highest thing, the most important thing he wants to do is make sure that the lethality of our troops is top of mind. It's the thing we trained for. If that's your point of view, the idea that you would put them on American streets in American cities when lethality is what they're trained for, as opposed to any of the other things that normal policing is about, keeping people safe. Keeping people safe isn't what a military does. Killing people is what a military does. It's a terribly dangerous set of decisions.
Yeah, or instead of having to kill people is creating these scenarios where people don't want to fight you, and so part of what was so awful about this week, which got almost no attention in the media, was this quote unquote rescission package, where they're making permanent about $10 billion in DOGE cuts to foreign assistance, where we're ending HIV/AIDS in Africa, where we're providing schooling and food for kids all over the world. I mean, the number of kids it's like 40 million kids are going to lose their education. That's so problematic for our national security, and then kids are going to die. It's morally, it's just outrageous, and that makes us all less safe, because when we leave those places, our foreign adversaries come in, and then the task of our military becomes that much harder. It's I don't know if I can say this. It's a move. It's such a move to our military. It's awful.
It's terrible. I mean, and you brought up this rescission package as one big, beautiful bill, a bill that just turns Project 2025 into the law of the land. There isn't a page of that bill that doesn't turn my stomach. I mean, including stripping away from our courts the ability to hold this lawless administration in contempt. That in one stroke, if they pass it, says, I guess those executive orders are law of the land. He can dictate. And I mean, there's nothing about this bill that is acceptable.
Yeah, so there's two bills. One is this rescission package, which we passed on Thursday. That's just the $10 billion.
I see.
And,
I apologize.
Yeah, and then no, it's okay. And then Trump's larger tax and slash healthcare cuts bill. This one big beautiful bill, as he calls it, is now in the Senate. Both are now in the Senate, and he, one is rescission and the other one is reconciliation.
Yes,
so
apologies.
It's DC words. DC words. But yeah, the rescission one was foreign aid. We're going to make permanent the cuts to foreign aid. And people will die, and our adversaries will gain footholds in places all over the world to the detriment of our national security, and they're cutting PBS. The reconciliation bill, to your point, is going to take away health care from 16 million people, food assistance from tens of millions of people, add $2.5 trillion to the deficit, and there's language in there that would allow him to do whatever he wants, and regardless of a court order. And hopefully the Senate kills the bill, and we have to keep our focus on that. And so my message today throughout the day is going to be, say what you want about the parade, and then go online and shout as loud as you can about how terrible this bill is, because he's going to do everything he can for the next 30 days or 2 or 3 weeks to keep the attention away from the Senate, because this thing is so unpopular. But that line should be removed by the parliamentarian. The under reconciliation, you only need 50 votes. You don't need 60. And the deal is, because the Senate's weird, the deal is you can do it under reconciliation and only 50 votes so long as there's no policy in it. It has to all be about spending and revenue, just budget stuff. And saying that you can defy courts is not spending. And the parliamentarian, it only requires one member of the Senate to say, I object, send it to the parliamentarian, and the parliamentarian is an independent non-member of the Senate. She should throw it out. And hopefully that's what happens, and there's a lot of work to make sure that happens.
Yeah, I believe that. I expect her to throw it out. I just don't know that I trust the Senate to leave it out, having done that. We're in a lawless time, and that's Correct. Frightening. Yep.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. We need to raise our voices about the long game. And every day is a distraction, but a dangerous distraction. Really, people get hurt on the streets. All of it's horrific, and all of it puts a particular kind of burden on like, I don't know, the 11 of you that there are in purple districts, right? Who actually hope to legislate for people across party lines. That's a sort of unique burden on you. Talk about that a little.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a burden that comes with responsibility. Obviously, all burdens, or most burdens do, which is, you gotta be, as compelling as possible with your colleagues that where they may be is not exactly where voters are. We have a good sense as to where voters are. Voters do absolutely want the priority to be the economy. They want this economy fixed, like a complete overhaul. It is a mess that's obviously rigged for the wealthiest people in the world, and that has to be the focus of our governing strategy, which is you got to fix the tax code, the regulatory system, everything, so that power and wealth gets shifted back to everyday Americans, so that they don't have to spend all week, stressing about their bank accounts, that they can work hard, that hard work pays off, and that we have a tax code that rewards hard work, not wealth. They also need to understand that people do care about public safety. They care about national security. They care about what's happening around the world. And they want us to be tough and go after the bad guys. And here they want, our streets safe. People want law enforcement and police to be able to do their jobs. And most of them want common sense gun reform so we can get these guns out of the hands of criminals. And that, I think, it requires us to look at the 90s when we did gun reform and we paired it with hiring more cops. And so the cops were on board. And so I think that's, and then on the border, people want a secure border. They want structure to this, and they want a common sense immigration policy where people can work and the criminals got to go. And, we have to lead on that again. We used to be the leaders on this, and then we lost the thread. So I think it's really important for us to be able to say, look, guys, please listen to us. This is where voters are, and a lot of us do that. But it does mean we take harder votes, and we're less popular on Twitter because we don't go on there and say crazy partisan stuff. But I think we're the ones that hold the fort down.
I do, although I'm going to need stronger stakes to hold the fort down in this storm. The economy does it. Your criticism of the economy is absolutely spot on, and Americans feel it. There's nothing in the one big beautiful bill that I want to say this differently. Everything in the big beautiful bill only makes those problems worse.
Correct. I mean, it literally is one of the, I believe, arguably, the most significant transfer of wealth from everyday Americans to billionaires ever.
Yep.
I mean, it's hey, your health care, we need it because we have to pay for these tax cuts for the wealthy. That's this bill.
Yep. And the other, I'm just thinking about your whole list and safety. I trust mayors more than I trust Donald Trump to think about how to get public safety in the country. But part of it, you can't close all the rural hospitals. Go ahead.
Just a quick shout out to all my Democratic mayors. Be serious about public safety. All of you need to be serious about public safety because you and the governors are on the front lines. You're in the public eye. Work with your police, work with your community members, work your tails off to get crime, shooting, all that stuff down. And you do it by bringing police and community together and then all hands on deck approach. But you got to be all in.
Yeah, and many are. I think one thing would help is to have fewer weapons everywhere. I mean, and I believe your friends in Congress want to take all taxes off of guns and silencers and other things that are certainly not helpful if you care about public safety. Yeah.
No, and this is why you go back to the 90s, the crime bill. There was a mass incarceration component to it. Don't do that. That didn't work. But there was we got a ban on assault weapons, and I think you sit down with police and you say, look, we're gonna put a bill forward to say we're gonna hire 100,000 more police officers. That's what we did in the 90s, and our communities desperately need more officers. What are the big common sense gun reforms that you would help us lead on? And they'll say red flag laws. We want money for anti-gun task force forces and data systems that allow us to get these guns faster. They would talk about comprehensive background checks. They would talk about all of the things that would make it harder for guns to be flooded into their communities as they are now. And we get it passed.
Yep. And then, security abroad, let's just take a couple minutes because those wars didn't end on day one in Europe or the Middle East. Both seem to have expanded since Donald Trump's been there. I just don't see I'm the great negotiator. I don't see it on the 90 trade deals in 90 days where we have maybe 1.5. I don't see it.
That they had to send. They had to send letters to countries reminding them that they needed to engage regarding the trade deals that they haven't heard from other countries.
Yeah, right. It's a joke, and we're a joke, and it's a dangerous joke because it's going to backfire on the American people.
Terrible. Yeah.
Terrible. Absolutely terrible. Well, all right. Today is a day of lots of rallies out there all across every state. And I know you have plenty of events all day long. I really appreciate you're giving us time and talking to us about what, again, I'm going to say it differently. I think there is a majority in America to be cobbled together. Neither party has been able to do it in a couple generations, but it's there, and it's very close to the stuff you're talking about.
Yeah, 80% of us are in the same place, and that it's the 20% or 15% on the far left and the far right. They get all the attention, and ultimately they pull their parties in a direction that sort of pulls them away from the 80%. So, and hopefully what emerges after this, or as this is all unfolding, is a return to really, a serious and center left, center right leadership, but a new kind of leadership that is much bolder and much tougher and much more serious about making big things happen.
Yeah, we need to. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And good luck out there today. Yep. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Lisa Graves is back. She is, of course, the founder and executive director of True North Research, a national investigative group that has done so much to shine a light on the dark money corrupting our everything, our politics, our everything. And Lisa, you've written a new book.
Yes, I have. It's called Without Precedent, and it's about how John Roberts, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, posed as a fair umpire when he was making his appeal to the American people when he was nominated back in 2005, but how the past 20 years have demonstrated that he has not been a fair umpire and, in fact, has been moving a really regressive agenda through the court, through the U.S. Supreme Court, in a way that has really harmed our rights. So it's Without Precedent, and it's available for ordering through withoutprecedent.info. Yeah,
well, I could not agree with you more about John Roberts. You know what? Maybe can we start by talking about the Roberts Court and putting it in its ideological place for people? And let's do this sort of in different areas. Where would you put it in the continuum of support for a broad, inclusive democracy?
It is hostile. The Roberts Court is hostile to a broad and inclusive democracy. And it is the most hostile court on that count that we've seen in perhaps a century. There was certainly an earlier period in which the U.S. Supreme Court was betraying the commands of the 14th Amendment, which was the hard-won amendment to the Constitution after the Civil War that guaranteed equal protection of the laws, and was only really in the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education decision that command of the Constitution was beginning to be really enforced, and that was 90 years after it was created. And John Roberts and the Roberts Court have been systematically limiting the effect of that amendment, along with its counterpart, the 15th Amendment, which included authorization for an expansion of voting rights. John Roberts has been, in a way, singularly hostile to voting rights and making it a mission of his, in essence, to limit the reach of the Voting Rights Act. So I would say that in modern America, in the most recent century, John Roberts and the Roberts Court is decidedly hostile to the American vision in the Constitution of having an equal society rather than one that continues to assail efforts to redress racial discrimination and more.
Yeah, voting rights, voter registration, gerrymandering, election management, and oversight. I agree with you, hostile on all counts. Where would you put the Roberts Court on support for the idea that property rights sometimes bend to things like consumer and environmental protection?
I would say that, again, the Roberts Court is a regressive court in the sense of it's in his determination to limit our ability through our elected representatives and through our regulatory agencies to put constraints on corporations. So the Roberts Court has worked a regressive revolution in the law, taking back a decision that came out of during the Reagan administration, actually at the urging of the Reagan administration, that federal courts deferred agency determinations. In that case, it was called Chevron. It involved environmental regulations. And what the Roberts Court has done, really at the behest of billionaire Charles Koch and his cohorts, is to overturn that precedent, which now allows judges to substitute their judgment for the agencies that have gone through a rulemaking process in order to implement the statutes that are designed to constrain property in the form of capital, meaning corporations, and their ability to cause harm. And so this revolution, along with an earlier decision from a couple of years ago which has been dubbed the Major Questions Doctrine. It's not a doctrine at all. It's an invention by this Supreme Court, by the Roberts Court, to allow courts to stop agencies, for example, from implementing measures to mitigate climate change unless Congress has done a very tailored mandate allowing the agency to do so, rather than allowing it to do so under its authority, for example, to regulate pollution and protect our environment. And so on those two scores, by the way, the major questions theory and the reversal of Chevron, you know who's giddy about that? The richest billionaires in America, including Charles Koch.
Yeah. And, on the Chevron case, what's particularly, history has a way of poking us in the eye. It was Gorsuch's mother who was the head of EPA who put it in the first place. And he's like, yeah, no.
Well, the thing about it is that Ann Gorsuch was really one of the worst EPA directors in history. Now, I think Scott Pruitt gave her a run for the money, and certainly we'll see what the second round of Trump does. But, the EPA was created during the Nixon administration. It was in response to terrible environmental devastation in this country. We had a massive oil spill, doesn't even begin to describe it, but an oil blowout in the Santa Barbara harbor that, put thousands and thousands of gallons into the Pacific Ocean that washed ashore there in Southern California. We had rivers on fire, in Ohio from pollution. We had smog that was just grotesque. We had also, tremendously important books like Silent Spring, talking about the pesticides. And so there was a real movement in this country. The first Earth Day occurred during the Nixon administration, and that helped propel Congress to enact rules, and then propelled Nixon to help create the Environmental Protection Agency. But then when Reagan came into power, he put Gorsuch in charge. He also put other people in charge of environmental issues who were like the Department, James Watt, the head of the Department of Interior, a good friend of Ann Gorsuch's, who had this strange evangelical doomsday scenario in his head that they really had to use as much of our woodlands or whatever, because Armageddon was coming. This idea that we weren't really supposed to be stewards for our environment. And so sorry to go on about that point you raised, Edwin, but Ann Gorsuch, her son was in Washington at the time. They'd moved from Colorado. He was going to a private prep school alongside Brett Kavanaugh. At that prep school, Neil Gorsuch, chip off the old block of Ann Gorsuch, formed a club to attack the teachers. It was a fascist club, and he was proud of it. And so those were his roots. And then you come fast forward to him getting an appointment to the Supreme Court, where he has been basically imposing his mom's regressive agenda from the bench, and more so.
Yeah, we're going to get to imposing from the bench in a bit. So we've talked about this court's, where it stands on the spectrum with regard to voting rights and property rights. Let's talk about religious freedom. When conscience calls upon someone to be a racist bigot, is that more important than another person's right not to be treated unjustly in this court?
In my view, in this court, that's exactly what's happening. The Roberts Court is using the First Amendment's guarantee of the ability to worship, the freedom to worship, using that free exercise clause as not a shield to protect your ability to worship in church as you please, as is consistent with your conscience, but turning it into a sword to assail the 14th Amendment's guarantee of equal protection of the law. And so what we've seen is a series of decisions in which, first of all, the Roberts Court has been systematically dismantling, again, is too weak. It has been destroying the separation of church and state in case after case. And it has been allowing people to assert that their claimed religious belief authorizes them to basically impose that belief on others in a couple of areas, including in discriminating against LGBTQ Americans, but also it even had the audacity to issue a ruling in a case called Hobby Lobby, in which it found that a corporation has a freedom of conscience, or a religious freedom, in essence, that's what it said expressly, a religious right to bar its employees from access to contraception under the Affordable Care Act under the guise that the corporation has religious beliefs that supersede the right to access statutory rights by the women that work for it. And then after the court issues this decision, that corporation and the people who lead it, the Green family, were found by the federal government to have engaged in systematic looting of treasures from the Middle East to fill the Bible Museum, and paid a substantial fine for basically knowingly taking stolen goods out of Persia and that region in order to fill its coffers. And so, I read the Bible from cover to cover and read many passages many times. And I've seen, one provision of the Bible strikes me as crystal clear. It's thou shalt not steal. But what's not in there is any notion that people get to, there's no notion that it's a mortal sin to have access to contraception.
Yeah. Crazy, right? So these are pretty big areas, and this court has picked sides, not this fair arbiter in the middle. They've picked sides on these. And I mean, if you were mapping this court, there are other issues. We could do this on other issues too, but
we could do a series on this, Edwin. We should do a series on the others. Yeah, right.
We could, and this court would find itself on the fringe of American history in some ways. But not that there aren't other moments in American history that are like this, but on the fringe in the sense that it is so out of step with where the country is in this moment.
Yes, that is exactly right, and that's the sweet doggo in the background there. But yes,
love dogs. Never apologize for a good dog.
Oh, dogs are the best. Dogs are the best. Anyway, yes, this court really is on the fringe. Look at the issue of abortion. This is an area where a substantial majority of Americans supported Roe versus Wade and support people having access to abortion. They may not choose abortion for themselves if they were to become pregnant, but the American people as a whole, and a significant majority, support access to abortion for themselves or for other people. And they do not support the reversal of Roe. But this court went out of its way to take a case in order to reverse that landmark decision. And it did so in a way that was really extraordinarily hostile. That decision was written by Samuel Alito, and it even cited as authority the claims of a witch hunter, a medieval witch hunter, as some basis for the rights of American women in the year 2022 and forward. And so it is decidedly out of step. And by the way, abortion is more popular in polling than the current president, the former president, the current president who is a former president, and basically all the presidents back to Eisenhower. It is a dramatically important right that helps people to make healthcare decisions based on their life, their doctor's recommendations. But what we have is a minority of people who are basically trying to use their legislative posts, and in this instance, their judicial posts, to impose their personal views as the law, to deny people access to safe medical care that helps them choose their destiny.
And in some cases, helps them stay alive. Yep.
Yes, exactly. And in fact, we've seen the outcome of that. We've seen since the Dobbs decision, as these states have been unleashed to impose draconian abortion restrictions, we've seen hospitals deny access to care, health-saving and life-saving care to women who were miscarrying. In some of these instances, these were women who they and their families wanted to expand their families or wanted these births to go forward, suffered significant medical issues and bled to death because they could not get the care they needed because the hospitals or doctors were afraid of violating the law by providing an abortion to them that would have saved their lives. In other instances, we've seen women who have had to go through extraordinary means to try to obtain an abortion. We've seen threats in Texas that people be arrested for using the highways to drive to another state to obtain an abortion. We've seen women attest to the fact that because of the delays caused by these draconian measures in terms of them getting the health care they needed, they've lost their uterus, their womb, and their ability to have children in the future. So it is an ongoing, unfolding tragedy caused by this Supreme Court and its determination to basically impose an ancient notion, one that in fact has been discredited by historians in terms of the availability of abortion in prior centuries. Yeah. And in some religions, including some in the Muslim faith, abortion is permissible up until quickening. And that was in fact the case in America in many instances. That there was a period in which abortion was acceptable. And in fact, Benjamin Franklin, in one of his early publications, published a recipe for an abortion medicine.
Yeah. And yet Roe v. Wade didn't say it was available until quickening. It set a balance between all these things that was a balance. And these guys said, forget balance. We want it all. All right. Yeah. Let me talk to you about recently. I think it was this week. I could be off by a couple of days, but the Southern Baptist Convention met, and this is the largest Protestant group in America, and they said, we are going to go and play the long game here. We see how religion was able to be organized in a way to get rid of abortion rights. We are going after Obergefell. We think gay marriage should be illegal. What did the proponents of free choice learn anything in this long battle over abortion rights, which at the moment we have lost in the courts, that will help us better prepare for this fight against the same forces to preserve this unbelievably simple idea that people should marry who they love?
Yeah, it really is extraordinary. And some of the context there is that after Roe versus Wade was issued in 1973, it was the Catholic Church and Catholic leaders, based on their faith and the determinations of the Pope, who opposed that decision. But many evangelical churches supported the decision. In fact, there were press releases in support of Roe versus Wade from some Christian churches. And so it's been a real revolution in the politics of this country, the way that this issue, access to abortion and also access to contraception, has been sort of weaponized as a political tool, and one that has accrued some power to the right. And that has led to some of these moves by evangelical churches to sort of change positions. But on the issue of gay marriage, you know, when I think about the notion of freedom or liberty, the type of liberty that the Constitution protects, you know, it's really extraordinary to think that anyone has a liberty to deny someone else the ability to marry the person they love. I can think of little that would be more painful for a person than to be denied by the state the ability to make a commitment to marry someone who you love, an adult you love. And the idea that some groups think that not only, you know, can they deny that right to their followers, which is, in fact, if you belong to a church and that church does not want to recognize marriage as a sacrament, as a religious sacrament, that is the right of that church, and that is the right of the people who go to that church. That's fully within their rights. But why should that dictate the rules of civil society, a society that is not a theocracy, a society that expressly forbids the establishment of religion, forbids religious oaths and tests of office? And so here you have a situation in which really for a long time in America, that sort of religious view was allowed to be imposed in a way that was inconsistent with the idea that we are a civil society, that we are not a religious governance, we are not a theocracy, and that, of course, people should be able to enter into a marriage contract civilly and have the rights of a civil marriage contract, which include, you know, joint property ownership, ability to access health care, helping each other, you know, health care, health insurance, being able to be in the room when your loved one is ill, having responsibility for children and decisions for schools, and having access to the rules for, you know, wills and divorce. But some of these groups and their leaders and their followers want to deny other Americans those rights who do not practice their religion and who have no obligation to practice their religion. But to your question of what have we learned, I think what we've learned is that we are going to have to mount an even wider defense of the right to marriage equality if we're going to preserve it from this effort to get this Supreme Court, this court that has proven to be so unfair, from again following the dictates of the far right and the religious right, with this rise of what I call the crynets in this country, this effort by some people to try to use our civil laws and our courts to basically impose their own personal religious ideas as binding law on the rest of us.
Let me put you spoke about how religion is being used sometimes to impose across civil law here. I want to put the question the opposite way. What if there's a religious group that believes it's okay to have gay marriage and their priests perform or conduct the marriage rite? Would this court, in the guise of protecting religious freedom, then say, well, we have to recognize those marriages? Or would they say, as I think they might, you know what, some religions are more equal than others?
Yeah, it's interesting. It remains to be seen what this court will do. We know that Leonard Leo, through the groups that he helps fund, he's the guy who helped handpick the people, basically handpick the Trump nominees, and he's the person who helped get the confirmation of all 6 of the justices in the majority on the U.S. Supreme Court. And he's been trying to, through one of the groups that he funds, cultivate sort of multi-religion efforts to assail the separation of church and state. And so we know that they have been deploying, some sort of strange bedfellows tactics, or that they've been identifying, a Muslim group or a Jewish group to go along with a Christian group in assailing something. It's a tactic. But in terms of the Supreme Court, I don't think that it would. That's a good question. It's a great law. It's a great law school final question. I guess at the end of the day, I don't think that the court would be as receptive to the claims of a minority religion as it appears to be receptive to the claims of a majority religion.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I was looking at this issue in my book, one of the things that I discovered was that if you look at the percentages of people who practice different faiths in this country, it's like a third are Christian or evangelical, about 20 some percent are Catholic, and about 20 some percent are atheist or agnostic, like the same percentage. And then there are other faiths that form a minority percentage. But in America, I think America's religious diversity is due to the protection of freedom of religion, to not having the state impose doctrines. And some people say, oh, well, if you didn't have religious influence in law, you wouldn't have laws against murder. Well, that's not true. Civil societies from all different faiths, including, in China, with Confucianism and other, the idea that you have to have a Christian laws in order to have moral rules, like rules against murder or rules against theft, like that's not true. Those are human ethics. If you go back to ancient codes, these are things that have long been barred, and it's not as though it has to be one particular religion. But what we're seeing in America, which we're not seeing in Europe, for example, what we're seeing in America is this rise of this notion. And the Federal Society, actually, which Leonard Leo co-chairs, has a subgroup on religious freedom in which they've produced seminars claiming that it violates your right to exercise your religion for someone else to have access to abortion, for someone else to have access to gay marriage. And I just think that's just extraordinarily arrogant and wrong-headed. It doesn't harm your right to have your freedom of conscience if you oppose abortion or if you oppose gay marriage for someone else who does not have any obligation to practice your religion, to live their life freely and have access to marriage equality, for example.
Absolutely, Lisa. And to generalize Leo's principle, any form of diversity is an affront if we all must be the same and think the same. But there is no strand of American history that says we all have to think the same thing. So he's just dead wrong. Dead wrong.
Yeah, and he's now investing in this spat that he had with Trump this past week or so. Yep. He's now gone on this charm offensive, or basically a PR campaign, to say he's not worried because he's going to be spending huge money to invest in Hollywood. He has been secretly investing in Hollywood films.
Well, sure, he got $1 billion gift after all.
Yeah,
2 years ago.
Yeah.
So let's the Leo is a pivot that lets me ask you a different kind of question, because the spat is not a trivial one that he had with Trump. It reflects two very interesting two things that make up one problem. One is that Leo's invested in the John Roberts cause, which is to create an oracular court that is the most powerful thing in the country, that expands the world over which it gets to make decisions until it makes profound decisions about all of us, some of which in most of our history would never be for the Supreme Court. Now, I know that Congress's dereliction of duty is partly responsible for this, and it's a dereliction partly the result of Citizens United, which he gave us, but they're not doing their job. And so the court says, well, we'll make all those decisions. We'll just be the grand legislature for the country. But his actions have also created Donald Trump as an imperial executive branch, also wanting to be the last voice on everything that has to do with our lives. They're either headed for some enormous collision, or they're headed for some compromise that sells all of us out. And I want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, that's right. Leonard Leo has been, really trying to, in a way, supercharge this court with right-wing operatives and the lower courts as well, and even some state Supreme Courts, which he's targeted. He wants people who are going to be reversing the precedents of the 20th and 21st century that have protected our rights. And that basically has led to a court that has engaged in a sort of judicial supremacy, as you describe it, Edwin, where the court has taken away the power of Congress. It has limited the power of Congress, for example, to regulate this extraordinary amount of money coming in from billionaires to influence our elections. That was in a case called Citizens United and its progeny. And that kneecap the ability of Congress to adopt certain provisions that were Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, which was known as McCain-Feingold, that were designed to prevent corruption and designed to prevent the domination of this outside money that we've seen in the last 15 years since that case was issued. But as you point out as well, this same court has been has played an unprecedented, and I would say without precedented, role in giving a president extraordinary power, and that was through John Roberts' machinations to give Donald Trump immunity from criminal prosecution last year. The New York Times detailed how he basically worked that case to give Trump that immunity that is nowhere in the Constitution, that is counter-constitutional, that is extremely dangerous, that stopped the prosecution of Donald Trump for his actions in 2020 and 2021 to overturn the results of our democracy. And John Roberts paved the way for Trump's return to power through that decision. But also, what was happening before that case was that the Colorado Supreme Court had upheld removing Trump from the ballot because of his role in the January 6th insurrection. And it was Leonard Leo who was on the side of Donald Trump and trying to stop a fellow leader of the Federal Society, co-founder of the Federal Society, from basically weighing in as if the Federal Society had a view on this issue. So just to unpack it, Stephen Calabresi, one of the co-founders of the group, was saying that the Colorado Supreme Court was right. And Leo was weighing in to basically keep Trump on the ballot. So it was a big spat this past week, but it's also the case that Leo helped Donald Trump stay on the ballot. Leo helped put the court in place that kept Trump in play for this election, despite the fact that he really caused that insurrection, that he incited that insurrection. And also, this court has been giving the president really, quote, the benefit of the doubt in a way in these interventions where the Roberts Court has been stopping temporary restraining orders that lower courts have been issuing against some of the really extreme and outlandish assertions of power by Donald Trump in this new term. And so while the lower courts have been trying to protect our rights and regulations and labor contracts and just ordinary rules and procedures, the Roberts Court has in several cases come in and set aside those lower court orders restraining Trump, and instead has allowed those actions to go forward while the cases are litigating. And so I think that the court is still putting its thumb on the scale of justice for Trump. It may not rule in favor of him in every instance, but I think it's been going out of its way to allow his extreme dictates, which are dressed up as executive orders, but are really sort of in many instances like press releases or irrational, capricious, and arbitrary assertions of power by Elon Musk and the so-called Doge to go forward despite them being contrary to long existing law.
Yeah. Or TikTok, which Congress and the Supreme Court said should be out of business. But I don't know, they're still here. All right. Well, Lisa, fascinating. And we've run through our time. Tell everybody one more time how to get your book.
It's at withoutprecedent.info. That's all one word, without precedent, and then .info. And it's so nice to be on your show, Edwin. Anytime, always a joy to talk with you, and wonderful to have a chance to speak with your listeners.
Thanks, Lisa. Take care.
You're looking at the big picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. And as you might have noticed, the show up till now was recorded yesterday because I wanted to attend Chicago's No Kings rally. And my first guest, now that I'm back, Will Bunch, the absolutely fabulous national columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer, also spent the last couple hours in, I guess, Philly's version of the same. So, Will, welcome. And how was your afternoon?
It was great. We could have used slightly better weather. It was kind of a steady drizzle, but that was it. I mean, it was a drizzle, so you could walk around without an umbrella if you didn't mind getting a little damp. So, Philadelphia was kind of the flagship protest. You know, some of the lead organizers came here to speak, and we had a big crowd. I haven't seen a good estimate, but I would definitely say it was multiple tens of thousands, whether it was 10,000 or 50,000 or I don't know, but it was a lot. And, we, because of the flagship protest, some people came to Philly from outside the area. So I met people from Baltimore. I met somebody from Atlanta or from Georgia who'd come up. So, the one point I would make, a couple points, I guess, but one is, having been to or monitored, all of the protest activity since Trump took office in January, this was without a doubt, much younger, or let me put it another way. I mean, the boomer types who were out protesting back in April are still there. They haven't gone away, but now they're being augmented by, high school, college age kids, people in their 20s. Plus I saw a lot of people who brought their kids, brought little kids with them. Just a much more diverse crowd. Definitely, given everything that's happening, as you might expect, more Latino attendees, more African Americans, although they still continue to be underrepresented as people have discussed and talked about. That's not a new phenomenon with this movement. So that was all good. The other thing I thought that was really striking about the Philadelphia protest, and maybe this was probably true in Chicago too and elsewhere, is it was striking the use and proliferation of American flags. There were just American flags everywhere, and maybe more so in Philly because it's Flag Day, and Flag Day, like a lot of these colonial Revolution era holidays, has its roots in Philadelphia with Betsy Ross and all of that. But it was, and it was a little similar to actually what I saw in your hometown of Chicago last summer at the Democratic convention. The same thing, where the idea of progressives, liberals, people on the left reclaiming patriotism, because if you look at the two split screen events today, the No Kings protests, and then Trump's parade, which may start in D.C. in a few hours, God and the thunderstorms willing. If you look at those two events, I mean, clearly No Kings is the more patriotic one, is the one that's more about defending the true American values, of democracy and civil rights and whatnot.
Well, when I heard you say, we do a split screen between those two events, that's not what I thought you were going to say. I mean, Chicago's was like Philly's, huge, bigger than any we've had so far. Younger, as you say, but all the old. I mean, I marched with Reverend Jackson. All the old folks were there too.
That's great.
So it was both, young and old.
Right.
But the split screen I thought you were going to talk about, since Trump's parade hasn't happened yet, was the patriotism, the peaceful demonstration, the commitment to the kind of democracy where we can disagree but figure it out together on the one hand in city after city, and the horror show of right-wing vigilante terror that we are seeing in Minneapolis. And I understand that in Texas they had to shut down their capital too.
Yeah, I just saw something about that. Although, is that legitimate, or is that? I mean, the public safety.
The Texas one, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah,
that just happened.
When I say
Minnesota
is legitimate, I don't trust the state government in Texas. So
that's fair.
But the Minnesota thing. Yeah, I apologies for not mentioning that, but that is certainly horrific, and I mean, it's kind of a reality check on who's peaceful in America and who's not. I mean, is there such a thing as left-wing violence, and have there been on scattered occasions incidents that have been linked to people on the left? A little bit, tiny, but statistically, it's been shown that the vast majority of what you would call like domestic terrorism or domestic political attacks or events have come from the right, and we saw it again this morning in Minnesota, and one, I think it's always a loaded issue, but I think it's fair to look at this in a way as a kind of stochastic, if I'm pronouncing that word correctly, but stochastic terrorism, in the sense that look at the last week, the rhetoric from leading Republican officials who should know better, what they've been saying about Democrats, about liberals, about inciting anger. I just wrote in my last column before the one I'm working on now, I wrote about Trump's Fort Bragg speech, where he riled up these young troops, to boo Gavin Newsom and
disgusting.
Boo Mayor Beth. Right.
Yeah.
And so if you're a person on the right who's a little bit unhinged, as I'm sure this person in Minneapolis was to some degree, but you hear those messages and you think, wow, this is a way for me to become a hero. This is a way for me to look good to this movement by committing this act of violence, even though in reality it's totally insane. But I mean, that's what stochastic terrorism is, and it's no coincidence that you have this rhetoric on the right, and you have more of these crimes committed by the right.
Yeah. Let me provide another piece of evidence in support of that. This past week, in part because what we're seeing around the country is this rights in conflict, the right to protest and the right of cities to protect themselves from protests gone awry, from property damage or whatever it is. And that's always a tension in America. And that tension was most famously exploded in Chicago in 1968 at the Democratic Convention. So I went back this week and read the Walker Report, which was the report called Rights in Conflict about that event. As I wanted to understand, what did we conclude? What did we learn? And, back then the protesters egged on the police for sure, but the conclusion of the report, after weighing all the evidence, was that a police force that had been through a year of riots in Chicago began the year showing restraint. But then the mayor said, if it were up to me, I would tell the police to shoot to kill arsonists and shoot to maim people who are stealing. And he upped the rhetoric. And it gave permission to a police force to engage in what they concluded was a police riot, where the police ran amok and beat everybody in sight. Now, thank goodness back then we didn't have a culture of shooting everybody. But your point that when the leaders give armed law enforcement, whether that's vigilante law enforcement, fake law enforcement, or God forbid the Marines in Los Angeles, permission to act terribly, people are going to take them up.
And what's related to that, and this is politicians, but it's also right-wing media, Fox News or Newsmax and whatever. What they've really done in recent years, in particular, is they conflate protest. And look, we remember the Black Lives Matter marches in 2020, and probably, you and I both attended some of those, I'm sure. And you remember that the majority of those were peaceful, but in those cases, I would say even more so than LA, you did have some sporadic incidents of looting, arson, whatnot, and those sporadic incidents, were played on a tape loop on Fox News, and it's part of this campaign, though, to put it in the mind of the kind of person who, watches Fox News 14 hours a day, that when you say protest, you mean violent protest.
I got to disagree with you, Will. I disagree with you. When they say protest, they mean violent protests on the left, because none of them had any criticism of January 6th, which was the most violent protest we've ever, and criminal insurrection we've had.
Well, that's not really a disagreement. That's more like an amendment. But
sorry, it's a friendly amendment.
A clarification that
yes, sir.
that when they say protests by
they mean
progressives, liberals, Democrats, they mean it's going to be violent, because we've seen. Well, I know Texas did, and I think I've heard now. I think Missouri did this as well, and a couple other states even. All of them states with Republican governors called out the National Guard ahead of No Kings, which the protest in Chicago that you went to, the protest in Philly that I just got back from. I mean, the idea that you would need National Guard troops for that type of protest, which is almost had a very festive kind of atmosphere. It's just nuts, and you had this sheriff down in Florida, threatening to shoot people graveyard dead, but they want their viewers to think people are protesting means people are rioting. That's what they want people to think, even though the vast bulk of these protests are peaceful.
What I saw today was people protesting as much because we love each other and want to be able to be in a kind of country where we can argue and then go out and have lunch together and figure out how to live together in this place that we care about. It was peaceful, but it was motivated by the care we have for each other to live in a better place, almost as much as it was motivated by the loathing of the people who only see hate everywhere they look.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And also I noticed a lot is people want to be counted. They want to stand up and be counted. They want to show the rest of America. I mean, I think they even want to, to some degree, they even want to show the world, all these people in other countries who have been saying the last, 7 or 8 months since Trump was elected in November, what's going on with the United States, what's wrong. And people definitely want to show up and say, most of us are fine. We want to do the right things. And and we're here to show that we still, in spite of everything that happens, we still believe in justice and morality and decency, And so it's a lot of that. People feel like, people woke up today, the weather forecast, was kind of lousy. It's going to rain. It's going to drizzle. But it's like, no, if I don't go, I won't be counted. Yep. If I don't help produce a big turnout and show how many of us there really are in this country, that's what I think that's what they really need to accomplish. And in doing so, I think they hope to give strength to politicians, maybe change the media narrative. Although
let's go right to the politicians, because that's so important. Will, the election is forever from now, and I know everybody's like, how are we going to make it 3 more years? But one of the ways we will have a future to make it 3 more years is if we defeat this crazy, big, ugly bill, this enactment of Project 2025 into law that's currently before the United States Senate. The House passed it. Oh, I didn't read it, but I voted for it. The Senate, I have concerns, but I might vote for it. The rallies today are part about stiffening the spine of the United States senators to do the right thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I actually talked to a protester in Philly who had a picture of a spine, and she on her sign, she had not a picture, a relief, like the actual bones of like a spine,
like a Halloween skeleton.
Yeah, and I guess that's what it was. And addressing Schumer, although also, and she was right about this, other Republicans, moderate Republicans, it's like because they should grow a spine also, right, to stand up to Trump. And yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think that's a big part of it is give the bigger the turnout and the more forceful it is, it should scare Republicans in these, moderate districts, or these the handful of Republicans, for example, who represent districts that Biden won. We have one of them here in Pennsylvania, Brian Fitzpatrick from Bucks County, just north of Philadelphia. His district was won by Biden, and these people, as you know, and your listeners probably know, these people have stuck with Trump 100% so far on these votes. And but at some point, they may, if there's enough activity, they may see the light eventually. Some of them, but also, to stiffen the resolve of Democrats. Because we've had some bills recently where you've had too many Democrats supporting basically a Republican thing, whether it's cryptocurrency or some of these appointments or whatever. And so I think they're a target too. So when,
we have to draw the line.
When people ask, when people ask, well, what does something like No Kings accomplish? I think it's that. It's
and it's a counterpart to the president's Nuremberg rally later this afternoon.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Which I think I guess we'll never know. We'll never have a control group to do the experiment or whatever. But I think even if the weather had been beautiful in D.C., he wouldn't have gotten a very big turnout for that parade. Given the thunderstorms in the forecast, if he's allowed to go ahead with it.
You won't notice with Fox's broadcast. You won't notice. You'll be told it's a big, huge crowd. Isn't it great to see this show of honor to our leader on his birthday? That's what they're going to do, right? But the rest of us know better. Right. We were out ourselves. We know better.
Well, there are certainly going to be journalists out there. He'll be taking pictures. Pictures of the empty bleachers. I would have to assume that. So, they can only cover it. You're right. That's why those people on Fox News are so lost, because they're not going to get news from any other source, just from Fox. So.
Well, it's almost quaint. I just think it wasn't that long ago. You wrote a book, and you and I were here, and we were talking about, ways that people who are serious about public policy could think about making higher ed do a better job for American workers and could help level the playing field. It's a really important topic. It feels like a different world, because right now we're talking about whether or not we're going to have a working legislature that can ever think about things like that. Because I think that's not what's in this bill. This bill is all about, let's just break everything and give it, what's left to the richest people in the country. It's a huge difference in a couple of years that these guys have made.
Yeah. And, the people, when it comes to higher education, the people who get hurt the most are, working class folks, including, people in these red states, people in rural counties who want to go to college, but they depend on Pell Grants, and Pell Grants are being slashed. It's funny because Greg Sargent at the New Republic wrote a good piece on this, but it's. I don't want to minimize the war on Harvard and Columbia, because it is real and it is going to have an impact on those places. But those places are also, as you know, a tiny fraction of higher education in America, and the big places are whatever the state university campus that's near you, and there's dozens of those across the country. Those are the backbone of the higher education system in this country, and they are attended by middle class kids who depend on things like Pell Grants and other. And it's fun. You would think that well, maybe their movement wants to go after these elite universities and rich kids, but they're gonna help their own voters, get an education. But no, they don't want anybody to be educated. The very concept of education. They want people to have job skills for certain kinds of jobs that benefit the capitalist machine, and no more. And I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent. I know we probably don't have a lot of time, but one thing I'm actually slightly disappointed in Democrats with is, their attitude towards higher education recently has been like, well, we're pro higher education, but it's all about your career or whatever. And I would say no. I mean, if we need people also to learn civics. We need people to understand the Constitution so it doesn't get shredded again. And we need people
being learned every day. Yeah. So what we need is a fundamental. We need a courageous government that will, on the Democratic side, should we ever get power back for our people, that will really take on the entrenched interests so that we can right the American economy and the American work experience so that regular Americans, humans who go to work every day, benefit from their work. It can't all just go to the money.
Right. I mean,
you've said that for years. It's not that hard. We have to have the courage to do it. And again, things like today are part of that.
Absolutely. And one other thing I'd say about today, I didn't mention at the outset, is also there was a real diversity in terms of the causes that motivated people to go out there. I mean, a lot of people obviously were motivated by immigration and ICE. That may have been the number one thing, but certainly there's a lot of people concerned about what's happening to the LGBTQ community, especially to trans people, and that was cited by a lot of people. I mean, certainly the cuts, Medicaid and whatnot, and there were also
the foreign wars. There was all of it. Right?
Yeah.
But this is coalition building. We don't have to agree with everybody. We're all on the same side. We can disagree.
Right. Well, I was going to say one other thing is, there were definitely some Gaza protesters who had other issues. Like they had issues with Trump, and they had issues with what's happening in Gaza. And like you said, you need those kind of mergers to make this into a mass movement, because part of the problem in the 2024 election, especially with younger voters, is you had pro-Harris people, pro-Democrats, and you had a lot of pro-Gaza younger people turned off. And I think this movement has a chance to, especially given how predictably terrible Trump has been on the Middle East. I think there's a chance to re-energize these people and reconnect with them, and it should be taken.
Yeah, here's where old guys like you and me can give some wisdom to the younger generation. And it's just this. I am proud to stand with anyone who is going to stand up to fight for our democracy. And we can disagree about other things within that framework. But if they're going to stand for that fight, I'm proud to stand with them, even if I disagree with them about other things. That's okay.
Absolutely. And, I think Trump, with his horrific actions, is at least starting to drive that coalition, because it's starting to get. He's offended so many people on so many different issues that they're all motivated to come out. If maybe you weren't the type of person who would come out and protest Medicaid and Social Security cuts, but you're very concerned about LGBTQ rights, for example. And we saw that today. And we had people with signs that had 2 or 3 of those issues on the same sign. So I think it was all good.
Well, Will, I'm glad you were out there today. I'm glad that you continue to sit at your typewriter, because your writing is just so perfect for the moment we're in. You should find Will's work in the Philadelphia Inquirer. Often it is available despite the paywall. You can sometimes find it out there. It's worth the price.
You can sign up. You can sign up for my free weekly newsletter on Tuesdays. Just Google sign up for the Will Bunch. They changed the address for it, but you can still just Google sign up Will Bunch newsletter, and it's a 5-second thing where you put your email in, and then you'll get my newsletter, which is like a column plus every Tuesday. So
Well worth it, everybody. Will has got this moment captured, and he's worked 4 years to get here because he's been thinking about these issues for a long time. Thank you, Will, as always. It's great to catch up.
Yeah, Edwin, it is great. It's great to talk to you again.
Yeah.
You take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
All right, everybody. That was the great Will Bunch. When we come back, your calls.
Edwin Eisendrath is taking your calls now at 773-763-9278. The Big Picture is on now. WCPT 820.
Okay, the calls are stacking up already. Dave, get us started.
Hey, Edwin. First off, I'd like to send out condolences to our brother and sister progressive listeners in Minnesota for the loss of the Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband, and the prayers for State Senator John Hoffman and his wife to pull through, as they were that nutcase went in and shot these people, and there's
terrible.
Yeah. Anyway, so condolences, and then happy birthday, 250th birthday to my brother and sister Army vets. Anyway, all right, real quick, you were talking on that Fort Bragg. They had one thing where he's one of his perfect people that he wanted, and if they were in opposition to the current administration and didn't want to be in that audience, then they needed to speak with their leadership and get swapped out for that. And because I heard you talking with your guest about them with that clothing and that kind of crap that, you had them buying, the pro-Trump stuff.
Well, it shouldn't be sold on a military base. Shouldn't be allowed. I mean, in fact, it is against military rules, but no one is enforcing them. No. And that goes to the lawlessness of this administration. It clearly goes to the legitimacy of this administration. I no longer believe that this is a legitimate presidency. The office is worthy of respect, not Mr. Trump, and I just don't think it has. I mean, he has shown how do I want to say this? He has violated his oath every single day to faithfully carry out the laws of the land. He has instead used the power of the office to flout the laws of the land, and he's picked Pam Bondi to help him get away with it. It is not legitimate.
Yeah, and final on that Bragg thing, there was one colonel had, on a condition of anonymity, to avoid retaliation, he said, this is shameful. I don't expect anything to come out of it, but he said, I hope maybe we can learn from it long term. And that, I had went to the Schomburg, over by the Schomburg one. I got a late start, but my God, the people, that they were on.
Oh, was there a good turnout up there? That's great.
From what I saw, I'm not
That's
great at gauging, but I would have guessed a couple thousand anyway from what I saw driving by and that, and I was over there. I mentioned to my wife that I had a feeling of like when I went to the 20th anniversary, I had a deja vu. It was kind of like a feeling I was amongst friends.
Really. It was a very warm, everybody was happy to be there, right? That's the same with when I had downtown.
Yeah, and we had
oh my God, I wasn't sure I was going to make it back for this part of the show. It was such a crowd downtown, and I was like, towards the middle of it, I had to like fight my way out, and people were very nice. I'm like, I got to go, but it took me forever to get out of that crowd so I could get back here to you guys.
Yeah, like I say, I didn't have something in common maybe with a lot of people, either economically or whatever, professionally, but we all had one common goal. To try I'll do this wrong. And I told Richard Chu before, this morning, the first thing I did, first with that flag in my yard, I flipped it upside down, and I had a couple of little 3x5 flags. I flipped them upside down. I taped one in the back of my car window, and the other one I was waving as I drove by, blowing the horns and stuff and that. But it was just a great feeling, and I got to thinking, and then looking on TV at all of these ones, how did this guy win? Ain't possible.
No. It is possible. We and that's a little bit on all of
Musk.
us.
Musk.
But we'll get them next time, as they say.
Yeah. Anyway, I thought I'd share that with you. So
thank you, Dave.
One, Edwin. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Yep. Jim.
Hi, Edwin.
Hey.
Yeah, Edwin. Yeah, bring back prejudice. Bring back prejudice. That's a good idea by the Republican Party. They want to bring it back. But that would have really cramped my style growing up in Chicago, because I had a tab in every kind of a restaurant, from Chinese places, the Jewish delis, the black bars, you name it. And if these people didn't like me, I called these people by their first name, and they were friends of mine. But put these Republicans in a hospital or a hospice case. Will they check the papers of the people changing their diapers, or the people taking in the crematorium, or the people taking in the graveyard? Will their family check their credentials? Do you think they will? What do you think, Edwin?
I'd like to think the answer is no, but my experience, remember that during COVID, some of them screamed at their doctors with their dying breath, saying, "You're lying to me, I don't have COVID," and then they were dead. So, they might. They might.
No, you're right. Well, I don't want to see it. But anyway, great day today. But we're going to need more and more and more of it. But how, somebody, if you're writing history, I know that you're T school, and you want to pick out a couple of decades, this would be the one to explore, because it's so strange. I mean, it's just so strange, especially of all places, America, United States of America, that and I know, that's built that every individual, every Homo sapien from all over the earth has come here and contributed to our beautiful country.
Yep.
And the idea, but the whole idea was the experiment was to keep everybody a voice to everybody. And that meant anybody. You could be an Eskimo, you could be anything, but you had a voice in the process. But anyway, thanks for taking my call. I'm glad you're out there today. I know you're working hard. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. As always, thank you. And I'm glad you're part of this community. It's really important. Roosevelt, hello there.
Double E, thank you for taking my call.
Of course.
The complacency of the people that are in charge of our government right now, the hunger for power and money is unbelievable, like Jim says. What is it going to take, Double E, for this country to wake up when it comes down to weapons, when it comes down to the way they use words as weapons, when they use words that puts ideas in other people's head that are unstable or whatever, anger, politically motivated, whatever. What has become of this country when nobody takes a look at our near future and where we're heading to our end of democracy, which is happening and eroding as we speak?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When we have a leader, so-called, that's parading like a dictator. I want to be the dictator. When I was a kid, I hung around with gangs, and there was always kids that we used to call them wannabes, 13-year-olds, 12-year-olds. That's what this guy is right now. He's a wannabe dictator. He uses those words to foment, to start, to light a match to it. And that's exactly what he's done. He's destroyed future of this country. The future is in the youth of America. He's impacted monetarily. He's put them in debt. He's to your point, when these young men, look what he's doing. I mean, Everything is a sell. He sells out everything. Fort Bragg, you mentioned it.
Yeah.
I mean, he's eroding our democracy, Double E, as we speak, in front of our eyes. In front of our eyes. He's not hiding it anymore.
Everything you've said is right. He is eroding not only our democracy, but our whole society. Every value you hold dear, even things as simple as, doing to others what you would have them doing to you. Just treat people well. And that is a value held in nations that don't have democracies. So he's even imperiling that. He just is like, where's mine? The only thing that matters is like, where's mine? How do I get mine? And what do I have to step on to get mine? And where do we go from here? Well, they don't have a future because it's such a negative game they're playing. They don't have a future. We will recover. It's going to take a long time because the damage, as you point out, is real, and it takes less time to break everything than it does to repair it. But when we get the chance to repair it, we can't go back to where we were 5 years ago or 10 years ago. We have to reshape the rules so that the money doesn't run everything, because that's partly what made it possible for people to say, you know what, everybody's a crook. It doesn't matter. Who cares? He's my crook. Because people were feeling like, why is nothing working for me? And that makes it easy to pit people against each other. But I'm encouraged. I mean, today, Roosevelt, out there in that crowd, that huge crowd, strangers were coming up and talking to each other and saying, like, why are you here? Here's why I'm here. How do we help each other? How do we, get each other through this terrible moment? And how do we build the country we care about together? It was just beautiful. And that gives you strength. And this guy's going to parade his tanks tonight? Are you kidding me? While we're watching the horror in Ukraine, the horror in Gaza, what's going on with Israel and Iran. I mean, we see this horror all the time from war, which Americans are finally getting to see up close because we're seeing it in other parts of the world. And this horrible man just wants to parade tanks and military down Washington. I'm sorry. We have a country to build. And I want to say to him, you want to help us build it? Get started. If not, get out of the way. And I meant what I said at the beginning. My birthday wish for him, is that he figure out that he starts to want the right things, not the wrong things, that he heal his sick soul. And I'm not counting on it, but that's my birthday wish for the man.
Can I say one more thing, Double E?
Of course.
When Senator Padilla was taken to the ground, it gave me flashbacks when I was younger, because I've seen that over and over again in my community. Not only 3 guys, 5 guys on your back, on your limbs, one on your right leg, one on your left leg, one on your right arm and left arm, and another one on your back. I've seen it. I witnessed it. And these things that are happening, I'm afraid for what is happening to our youth while we're watching it, and that is he's poisoning their minds. And what he did in that Fort Bragg was horrible. I mean, you talk about horrors. What about Minnesota? What about this? What happened today in Minnesota? I mean, all these things that are happening in the span of 1 week. 1 week. The guy that supposedly never had a war when he was a president. Now he had the one in India and the one although the one in India, between India and Pakistan, they settled between themselves, between the two countries. But the one right now, with
Iran.
Yeah, Iran. Yeah. But I'm sorry, I'm just seeing things that we go over and over and over again, and at the hands of people that shouldn't have these weapons. We're going to go back to this thoughts and prayers again. We're going to go back. And have you heard of any Republican, GOP, anybody making a comment of what happened in Minnesota? They're always the victims.
I haven't yet, but in fairness, I was out in the rally. I assume that they would have said it's a bad thing. Now, saying it's a bad thing is not the same thing as pointing to Mr. Trump and saying, this is on you. You must stop giving people permission. That's exactly my point. Yeah. Yeah, I have not seen that, and I don't expect to see that. But you know what? There are more of us than them. And if we are not afraid, we will right this ship. But I don't want to be Pollyannish. I agree with you. The damage is real and lasting. Yep. And I will not live to see it completely repaired, but I believe my children will. You know, I think we are going to, when we get it back, we're going to move it in the right direction. I mean, there are a lot of log jams, you know, I mean, courtesy of our friends in the Supreme Court, we have to fight against a mountain of money on top of everything else. I mean, it's not going to be easy, for sure.
And when Senator Padilla, I was on hold with Patty Vasquez's show. I was on hold, and the senator stole my thunder, to be honest with you. Instantly, I thought of when he was taken down. Instantly, I thought about my people, the people that do the hard jobs of taking our food, and how are they treating them? Because there's no cameras there. So what he said, he is right. Mexican people, Latino people, and more than Latino people, African-American people. The same thing that happened to the gentleman that they put the officer for the neck for 9 minutes or whatever it was that killed him. If the camera was there, but if there was no camera, he would have gotten away with it. There's people that are walking around with and without badges and with and without masks that are committing crimes. The same people that are supposedly law and order. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you, Double E.
You
appreciate
bet. You bet. Nancy.
Edwin, how are you?
Thank you. I'm good. I share those concerns that you just heard from Roosevelt, but I am good.
Right. Well, I'm getting real tired of hearing all the same stuff every single day, nobody's come. I have one question for all of this. All the talkers, all the politicians, especially the moderate Democrats. Because don't tell me we outgrew a two-party system long ago. And are we doing anything about it? No. And the Democrats are no longer one party anyway. We haven't been for a long time. A big tent is not what we need. We need a lot of little tents with, like you said, we could disagree, but we all have the same what's the word I'm trying to think of? We all wanted best for everybody. So, we're never going to have that when the moderates keep, not only do we have to fight the cons, but we have the moderates who keep fighting us too. I don't consider myself a Democrat. I consider myself a proud, progressive, Bernie Sanders, democratic socialist. And if they would have listened to him from day one, instead of wasting all of our time over the last 50 years, we would be in a lot better place now. We would have never heard of a felon like this guy. Don't tell me that, first of all, he got in our White House in the first place. No, not if they knew how to fight and not if they followed the law. Now you're going to say that the not-so-Supreme Court is going to change or fix this? No. They've already been allowed. They've already been allowed to run rampant, and they're not going to be held accountable for anything. And that's why John Roberts gets away with what he gets away. They allowed them to pack the court. These guys do not know how to fight. And the one question I can ask any one of your guests today or any other time, because we keep hearing about the same thing over and over again, wash, rinse, repeat, about the felon and the muskrat and all the maggots. All we keep hearing is the same thing. Look what he's doing. Look what he's doing. Here's my question. Who the hell is going to stop him? Because, there are a bunch of answers to that. No, there isn't. There's nobody who's going to stop them.
Well, we got to stop this bill in Congress because that would only empower him more. So part of what we're doing today is putting pressure on senators all over the country, a Democrat and Republican and independent who are in the United States Senate. They must not pass this reconciliation bill. The rescission bill's bad too, by the way. Must not do it. And that's one step. That's one step in the fight. Then we have to get candidates who will take them on. And I, you missed this episode, but I had a guy on, from who is one of the biggest litigators for small d democracy causes in the state of Wisconsin, and they're in court now to try and open up their elections so that it isn't a two-party monopoly. And and we talked about, I told you, we talked about you on that show when I interviewed him, because there are efforts being made to try and think about ways that we can make our democracy work for everyone, which it hasn't done for sure. Nancy, thank you as always.
Well, I heard you that one day.
Good.
Are we ready for more than a? What was it? How did you put it? You even asked the question. Are we ready for enough more parties? I think that's
right. I want to break the monopoly a little bit. All right. Hey, Nancy, I want to take one more call before we go. Thank you. Bernie, you're going to be our last caller.
I just wonder if you have any comments. When the reformers were initiating the primary system, they thought they were taking the nominations out of the smoke-filled rooms. But now the primary system is used as a cudgel against any, renegade or maverick Republican or Democrat, whatever. We wouldn't have had the POC that's in the office right now if there were no primary system. Any comment on how to clean it up and how to make it better?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about it, but none that I can squeeze into the last minute here. But maybe we'll start I'll have some guests that will talk about that with us. Gerrymandering is part of the problem because it means that your primary is a smaller group and a more radical one on the left and the right, frankly. So we have it's related to map making, it's related to party rules. It's also, as Nancy points out, it's related to monopolies of two parties. And that, when one party gets captured, as the Republicans are, we are helpless because you have a huge institutional advantage for a group that really is actually not that big. So these are really important questions, Bernie, and we'll take them up during the course of the next few months. More seriously. Good question. All right, everybody, listen, no kings, no kings. For those of you who are really old and Chicagoans, you'll remember Garfield Goose was the king of the United States, and you would have to be a silly goose to think you could be the king of the United States. This is a vibrant, interesting country. And if there's anything that holds us together, it is that we all believe we should be free to speak our minds. And we are seeing on the other side, not only do they think we shouldn't be free to speak our minds, but they are using language that absolutely is encouraging people who, may have mental issues, may not really, we don't know, to go out and use violence to silence us. Violence to silence us. And this guy thinks running tanks through Washington is somehow an expression of our values and what we care about? Nonsense. We know better. We are better. Talk to you next week.